Hey, this is Robert here again at Fabrication. Now, if you're doing an LS swap, well, you are going to run into some challenges with the installation. That's just part of it. Now, we have an LS swap going on out in the shop, a 1955 GMC truck, 6.0 LS. Got it installed. We're going to walk you through some of those challenges we've already conquered. We're going to be going over fuel lines, which ones to choose, regulators, filters, fittings, how to make up and install the fuel line. And at the end of the video, I'll show you a kit that I've put together to solve those issues and make your life much easier. Let's get into it. And one of the first issues you're going to run into doing your LS swap is the fuel system. Traditionally, this would have had a carbureted engine with a mechanical fuel pump. The requirements for those, 5 to 7 psi. Upgrading to a fuel injected engine, now it's 58 to 60 psi. So we're going to have to fabricate some new fuel lines with fittings that are compatible with the stock LS fuel system. And I've laid out some fuel injection compatible fuel line. We'll start at the low end. Now this is a rubber reinforced line that can be used. It will stand up to the PSI requirement. Next step up, which I use most of the time, is called CPE. Now that is a chemically resistant hose with a braided case. Now this line is called PTFE. Now if you're using E85 fuel, you have to run PTFE line because it has a liner that is resistant to that fuel, so it does not break down or deteriorate the fuel line. Now let's talk about the high pressure fittings that we're going to be using to install onto our high pressure hose. Now these are Army Navy or AN fittings. They're all Army Navy fittings, but there's a couple of different types. One that I like to use, another that I don't like to use. And they come in different degrees, like this is a straight, this is a 45, a 90, and a 180 degree fitting. Okay, this type, we disassemble it and we have to install it onto a hose. Not a big deal. There is another type. It is called a push lock. It is this type. This is my least favorite type of fitting to use. It's compatible with the reinforced rubber hose. Basically, you just push this fitting onto the hose. It seats and you're done. Well, the issue with that, a lot of people use them. I personally don't use them. You have 58 to 60 psi of fuel pressure. If for some reason this were to fail, this connection, well, now you're on fire. and that's, yeah, we want to avoid that. So my least favorite type of AN fittings. I always go with this type. So much more secure, and it doesn't take that much longer to install. We have our two types of fuel rail adapters, and let me show you how they work. So the first type, now this is a 5/16 and this is a 3/8 line, so you have to order the correct ones. Now the first type is a stock type push and click. Real simple. Push that over till it clicks into place. Now the second type, which I prefer a little bit better, is a compression type. Now it's two pieces, has this cutout. It goes around the hose or the line, fuel rail line, seats onto this ridge. There is a O-ring inside of here, and you want to use a little bit of oil for the O-ring when you're installing these or putting lines together. And now it screws down into place and it becomes like a compression fitting. Now this line or this adapter is a little bit more secure. and then your fitting would come off of this, mated to your hose. Regular hand tools. Yeah, we don't use those for A.N. fittings. They make specialized tools like these. Now these fittings, they're aluminum. They're reusable if you correctly install them. You can take them off, lengthen, shorten a line, move them to a different line. Very versatile, very nice fittings. If you use a regular tool on these, you're going to round off the edges, and you're going to mar them all up. Yeah, we don't want to do that. We want them to look nice. That's why we need to use tools like these. These are aluminum. So the A.N. fittings come 4, 6, and 8, 10, 12, and 16. Those are the most common sizes. This wrench makes it very easy. You will need 2 wrenches. Now you can also buy a set of this type of fixed wrench also. And now we're going to get our fuel rail adapter installed. 3/8 supply line, 5/16 return line. And what you want to do first, you want to physically feel this end of the fuel rail. Make sure that there isn't any burrs or anything that's going to damage the O-ring that's inside of this adapter. After that's done, now we're going to put a little bit of oil, a little bit less than that. And then we are going to slide on. I like to twist, and then you'll know when it's seated. And now this collar, well, it has a slot on one end that fits around the tubing. And we just start tightening it up. Then we finish it off with our A.N. wrenches. Now this adapter is going to still spin. That's normal. Now I've already assembled the return line. I've chosen a 45-degree fitting because that's going to route really nicely down the back side of the motor, out of the way, down the frame rail. And I'm going to use a 45 for the supply line. We want to get this installed and this mocked up into place before we can make our final measurement and we know where to cut our fuel line. Don't want to cut it too short. So we're just going to mock this up into place. We're going to follow this existing 5/16 return line with a supply line. We're going to run those together. Going to come in with our Sharpie, and we want them, the hose is going to terminate here, the line, so we just want to put our mark. Now we have our cut line. Okay, we've got our tools, we've got everything set up so that we can assemble this fitting to our braided hose. But before we can do that, we need to cut the braided hose. Okay, everybody has their own favorite method. Some people swear by black tape. This green painter's tape is what I like to use. We've got our mark. We don't want to go here or the other side of the mark. We want to go in the middle of the mark. And I'll explain that in just a second. We want to go make 2 or 3 tight rounds. We don't want the tape to be loose. We can even go 4. Break that off. We want to remark the center of our cut. Now it's going to be very important that we cut this flush, or we cut the end off straight. We don't want a jagged cut or an angled cut. Very, very important. Okay, so let me show you how this fitting works. Okay, we unscrew this. Some pretty long threads. Okay, this cone, first, we're going to get this end, once we cut our hose, pushed on and seated. And I'll show you how to tell when it's seated. Then we're going to put a little bit of oil. We can go ahead and do that right now. I like to put some on the threads and then put some on that cone. That helps it go into the tubing much, much easier. We're going to seat this. Then we're going to start screwing this into the tubing just like this. It starts expanding. As this screws in, it compresses, flares out, makes a very, very good seal. Now we're not going to be using this section of the hose, so it does not matter if it gets damaged. We want to insert it pretty close, tighten it up. Now this step is critical, and we've got our little deburring tool. We want to gently go around. See that falling out? We don't want to leave anything in there. Then we're going to finish it up by bringing the other end out and blowing through. Let's see if we can get anything to come out of here. Yeah, we don't want any of that cut debris in our hose. That's going to clog up our fuel line right off the bat. And the trick is always getting this fitting over this braided hose. And we want to twist it until it's seated. You can see the hose inside there. That is in the seated position. Now we're ready to install our fitting. And we put a little bit of oil on that, on the cone and on the threads. When we can't turn it by hand anymore, now we want to put our wrenches on. And screw it down until it seats. Our line is installed. Now we're ready to install it onto the vehicle. LS swaps. There are two types of fuel pumps you're going to be looking at to use. The first is an end tank, which this is. Now, I like to use the end tank fuel pump because it is much quieter. It's not exposed. The other type is an external, like this one, and you would mount it between the tank and the motor. Now, this is a stock type Corvette fuel filter / regulator. Now, if you're running this, you don't have to run an external regulator because it's preset like a factory one built in. That simplifies things. Okay, so we're going to be mounting our fuel filter regulator. It's marked out, so this supply goes to the fuel rail. This one goes to the tank. Now, this part can be confusing. This is a single supply line fuel filter regulator, and it has a return port that just goes right back to the fuel tank if you have one supply line on your fuel rail coming out of your intake. Okay, so we have two. Our fuel rail has a supply and a return line. So it's not a big deal. A lot of people will cap the rail return line That's really not a good idea. That can cause issues. What I like to do, use this little cap. It's an AN cap. And we just cap the return port. And that's really as close as we can mount it to the fuel tank. We've done several LS swaps here in the shop, and I've put together some components. You can find all of these in the online store. And we've got fuel filters. We've got a fuel filter with built-in regulator, Corvette type. AN fittings. Now this is a regulator kit. Now this, really important, steam port connection. And all the components that you need for the motor mounts. Now, what is really nice about these, this bolts onto the block. Then there are multiple positions you can place for your motor mount. This goes into here, onto the frame. Makes things so simple. And we also carry braided hose. All of these items on the online store. Link is in the description.